Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we want to return to the subject of the Flashstor Flashstor series, the Flashstor 12 Pro for this video at the very least. But frankly, all of the results you're going to see today can easily apply to both the FlashStation 6 and the FlashStation 12 Pro because they both arrive with the same CPU and the same memory. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a series of performance benchmarks on this device in Plex Media Server in 1080p and 4K. We're going to be going through a multitude of different file formats and throughout the course of this video trying to identify just what the performance potential and playback potential of the Flashstor series that's just next to me is for Plex Media Server. However, before we go further, it is worth touching on a few disclaimers, not only about this device, but about our testing. And if you're new to the channel, it's really important that you understand exactly why we're choosing certain tests over others. But if you've watched the channel before and you know what I'm going to say, you can fast forward about 2 minutes. But for the rest of you, it is worth highlighting that all the tests we're going to be conducting today are going to be conducted over the local area network. We're not going to be remote accessing the NAS. Indeed, we have the NAS here, right next to us here on the table, being connected via a local switch. Now, the tests that are going to be conducted today are going to be a combination of native playback and conversions, otherwise known as transcoding, when a file is changed from its original format into a better suited file for the client destination device, or because of the network and just general connection between the Plex Media Server, in this case the Flashstor, and the connected device. Now, a number of you may wonder why we're going to be doing this via the web browser. The reason is that we want to have the most pure playback as possible because unfortunately we simply cannot replicate every user in the world setup. You might be watching your Plex Media Server on an Xbox, a PlayStation, a tablet, a mobile phone, a smart TV, any number of different kinds of devices, and all of these devices have different file format supports, they may have different resolution supports, they may have different network controllers or NICs, they may have very different connected bandwidths. So therefore it becomes very, very difficult for us to identify that a Plex NAS can be good at all of those things. So what we do is we connect to it via the web browser, and that allows us to manually or automatically get the files to be changed. Now, a number of you may ask, why don't you just use the official Plex client application? Because there is a Plex client application, and if we click yes there on screen, that allows you to enjoy files natively with support of things such as H.265, for example. And again, we could use the Plex app, but that would mean that all of our results would kind of be most suited to the client device I'm using and the Plex app here. Using the web browser allows us to be a little bit more customizable about the file format and allow us to scale it accordingly in a way that using the client application ends up resetting it towards. But we will be coming back to the application at some point because there are some files that may not work as well on the Flashstor as they do on the client, and I want to use the client app to show you exactly why. Now, if we start with today's tests, we can see that right now we are utilizing the Flashstor 12 Pro in media mode. Now, this is going to be important for some of you because if you are running this NAS for other services, then you're not going to want to enable that mode. But if you go into the settings option, then go into general, on the right hand side is media mode. And what that effectively does is tell the system to better utilize the integrated graphics of the Celeron processor inside this system. Now, that's Celeron, an N5105 processor there with a 2.0 to 2.9 gigahertz clock speed and 4 gig of memory, also has integrated graphics on board. Now, when you're playing back natively, it generally will not use those graphics unless you really push the system to do so. It's going to be utilizing integrated graphics or any onboard graphics or a graphics card in some systems when you are doing something where you're changing those files and it requires a more specialized tool to get the job done. One of which is HEVC that we'll talk about later on. We're going to be testing a lot of files, and a lot of the 4K files are going to be related to the Jellyfish files. These are test files that are the same 30-second file, but they scale in picture quality, bitrate, resolution and format, starting at a simple 10 meg and ending all the way up at 1.4 gigabyte in size, and that's the same 30 seconds of footage. And finally, this is a system that's running 3 separate volumes of storage there. Now, one might argue that we should be kind of really keeping track of which of the NVMEs inside this system we are using, but ultimately these are all rated together already, and the NVMEs will not serve as any kind of performance bottleneck. So although I'm showing you the storage configuration we have inside this device, frankly, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. So last thing I'm going to do is remove myself from the bottom of the screen. The reason being that we want to make sure we're harnessing all of our resources towards Plex Media Server here. So on the left, we've got Plex. There's our Plex NAS. And on the right hand side, we've got our benchmarks. You'll be pleased to hear, if we go into the transcoder, that we have set it to make my CPU hurt, and we are using an account which has a lifetime Plex Pass subscription there. We're going to be monitoring the CPU more so than anything. So let's start things off nice and light. We're going to go into the jellyfish files for a start, and we're just going to go, just to give you ourselves a benchmark, we're going to go ahead and just click a nice straightforward file like this one. Now the reason we're playing this rather middling file here is just to show you this is original quality. This is a 1080p 3 megabits per second file. This is already, you know, quite close to the average kind of file quality you might get, a 1080p file there. And it's running like a dream. We've got the orange bar at the bottom, and on the right hand side of the screen, the CPU isn't breaking any kind of sweat. We are going to be keeping an eye on how fast that dark orange area loads, because that dark orange area there, that is going to be ultimately how well the system is dealing with the file versus playback in the lighter orange. Now, alternatively, we could play this file, a 3 megabits per second HEVC file. Now, when we play this one, you can see the file has converted, and that is because this file is HEVC, otherwise known as H.265, also known as highly efficient video codec. Now, this is an improved compression technique over its predecessor H.264. Unfortunately, although it does improve compression, allowing large-scale cinematic releases to be compressed into something you can watch in your front room or on a phone, that the patent behind HEVC is a shared patent with, you know, ultimately the industry players. And unfortunately, unlike H.264, which is widely open source, H.265 requires licensing. So you may have devices in your local area network or in your pocket or even your bag or whatever, or even your TV and console that either don't have an HEVC license or do not have the option to add an HEVC license, or do not allow client-side conversions or transcoding. And that is when the connected client device, in this case a PC, but for you again a TV, maybe an Amazon Fire Stick, they may not have the privileges on the system to use the hardware on the client side to convert the file. And in those scenarios, that's when we're going to want to know just how well the Flashstor can alter these files. But playing that file again, as you can see, we're seeing the dark orange showing how well it's handling the file, and it's well outpacing that of the playback there. So although there is a small increase there in terms of CPU utilization because of that HEVC file, ultimately it's still doing a fantastic job there. So let's scale things up. Now we're going to go to a 30 megabits per second H.264 file there. So again, I'll stop double clicking that by accident. As you can see, straight away, it's playing that file like an absolute dream. It's playing it in the original quality, and this is 10 times the bit rate of the previous 1080p file. This is quite high for a 1080p file. Unless you've bought particularly high quality retail releases, you're not going to have a lot of 30 megabit files in your collection. So already this is doing a very good job here. Now if we play the same 30-bit file, but this time in HEVC, and we zoom in there, we'll already see that compared with that first file that we played just now, where that first file up here was 10 meg in size, our new files are over 100 meg in size. That's kind of the scale difference of 10 times in size that we're talking about here. So now we're going to play the 30 megabits per second HEVC file. We're seeing the dark orange, not quite as fast as it was before, but it is still outpacing playback overall, and of course we've had to convert the file in order to get the job done. And as you can see here on the right hand side of the screen, we're already seeing that little jump there in terms of CPU utilization being just a fraction more than what we saw previously. So now we're going to go for 100 megabits, and this time we're going to go straight into HEVC. We're not going to go with the H.264, and we're going to play that file straight away. Again, it's converting. Again, the dark orange encoding and buffering of the file is a little slower, and almost certainly we're going to see that increase just a little bit higher there. Not too much, and media mode is certainly working for us here, but ultimately the Flashstor, whether it's a combination of the integrated graphics in that Celeron or the NVMe level storage that this thing utilizes, still means this is doing an absolutely cracking job. Now, before we get to these 4K files down here, we're going to slightly change tack, because now we're going to switch to 4K. We're going to go for some of my 4K test files here. These are trailer files, and these are not as dense as these ones here, but they are certainly higher in resolution than the 1080p. So the idea is we're going to go straight into the trailers and start playing these. So first and foremost, we have an H.265 8-bit 60 megabits per second file, and it's in 4K Ultra HD. Let's play this file here, open it up at the bottom, and as you can see, we are doing conversion. We are utilizing transcoding. The dark orange, nowhere near as quick as anything we've seen so far, but it's still staying ahead of playback. We're certainly seeing an increase in CPU utilization, with a peak there of the system at 29% utilization, and 14% of that being Plex. So do bear in mind there is obviously system utilization there in the background, but still nonetheless the file is playing. But we're just going to take a quick pause to head back to the Plex Media Server application that we talked about earlier on, because this played that file in a converted fashion. So if we come out of that there, and this time we play the exact same file, but this time we play it in the Windows application. The Windows application has an HEVC license, so it can play the file originally. And look how fast it has buffered that file there at the bottom. So as you can see, although my tests today are primarily showing and trying to cover as many different user cases as scenario, if you are utilizing devices that have an HEVC license or client-side conversions, you are going to utilize substantially smaller amounts of system performance there. Remember before when it peaked at 29%? Now we're peaking at 17%. So do bear that in mind. Now, we'll try a couple of other denser files, such as this one here. This is the Dune trailer. It's an H.265 10-bit HDR 16 megabits per second file. Open that up there, and it's going for conversion. As we can see, very slow buffering there at the bottom. We're seeing it move along. We're seeing that CPU spike. It doesn't help. This is a very dark file here. But on the right-hand side, we're seeing a spike, but the spike has now exceeded into 34% overall. So nonetheless, it definitely would have outpaced that playback there. So we've got a decent range of files there to show us, and indeed if we want to go back to the H.265 files, the beauty of Taiwan, half the density in megabits per second than the other heftier file, the roast duck file. So this is 29 megabits per second. It's an 8-bit H.265 4K Ultra HD file, and although it's having to convert and CPU utilization is noticeably high, if you are concerned about transcoding and whether this can handle it, it most certainly can. Which brings us back now to the Jellyfish files. So now we're going to go for our heaviest hitters. It's these files here. These are 120 megabit, 200 and 400 megabit files, ranging from H.264 to H.265 and 10-bit HDR HEVC. So we're going to go for our first one here. We're going to open that up. We can see it's happening in the original playback because this is the H.264 version. We're seeing a slight pause there as we play the file, but we are seeing the file cease, even though the file is trying to play in that original quality. If we open up my task manager, we can see that we're not utilizing 100% of my system resources. So we can't blame the client recording device or OBS running in the background for why this file has ceased here at 5 seconds. This normally means that the system has hit something of a wall in terms of compression and stalled, and as you can see, it has ceased playing that file. So now we're going to try playing that file again, but this time when we play it, we're going to quickly pause, and this time we're going to convert the file. So converting that file down, we're going to go and convert it down to 1080p, and it's going to be converted into a playable H.264 version of that. And as you can see, it can convert this file. Now, a number of you may still have wanted to play back that file in its original quality and therefore aren't going to be too chuffed, but still nonetheless, it's good to know that at least you can convert that file down, although that may not be ideal for everyone. So once again, just before we move on, just to confirm things, we're just going to go ahead and replay that 120 megabits per second 4K file in H.264. And as you can see, once again, it's stalling at the 4 to 5 second mark. The CPU is trying, but overall it becomes overburdened in order to try and play back that file. And if we head in to the resource and activity monitor here, and we open that up within the Acer Store, we'll have some idea about the processes that are running in the background and just how much is being utilized by these systems. As you can see, it's all fairly much of a muchness, and how much historical data is up for debate. But moving forward, now we can look at the 120 megabits per second 4K HEVC file, and this means that the file is going to be automatically transcoded as soon as it starts to play, which probably means it is going to exceed the 5 seconds buffer we saw earlier, and as you can see, it is. So we're playing our 120 megabits per second HEVC file there. And although we are seeing a spike up to 36.5%, we are still able to play back that file in its converted fashion. So before we go any further, let's go back into the Plex Media Server client application, and now we're going to try to play that file from earlier that wouldn't play natively, because this will allow us to see if the limitation is to do with the web browser and the network. So we go back into the 1080p test files there, we select the library mode, the table view, go down, there's that 120 megabit file, and now we're going to try and play back that file natively, and as you can see, now it's playing. Now it is only just staying ahead buffer wise, but it is nonetheless staying ahead, which over a more aggregate long-term performance will overall mean this file could be played. In this scenario, it plays, and that's the big takeaway here. There's two ways to look at this. One, you can say that the web browser has limitations, which of course it does. But the web browser represents the more common user case scenario across all the different client hardware out there. So although I will say it was a successful playback in the Windows client, that is not fairly representative of all devices. Now let's go into our final files. This is a 200 megabit H.264 file. And if it wasn't able to play the previous one in the web browser, there's every possibility this is going to do our 5 second stall once again. And again, there we are. The 4 to 5 second stall there at the bottom left. Zoom in a little bit there. We're still seeing that stall there. And if we zoom out while we're outside of that browser, it may play catch up in the background. And we can see there in the background when it comes to utilization that it's trying its best there in the background. If we go for the performance measures there, we're seeing the same, not dissimilar bumps. We're seeing the network traffic go up quite significantly, but this is still not maximum saturating a 1 gig network by any regard. Overall, we can't really call that a success, and I'm sure if I go ahead and try to play it in here and it's native, it will play it. So again, it is not completely game over, but it's certainly going to be game over in some user case scenarios. And the buffering there, as you can see, is only marginally staying ahead of playback. And as this is a 30-second file, it's not really representative of, say, a movie, but it's worth bearing that in mind. And we go to our final files, and these are arguably the big guns. These are some of the biggest files I ever test here on the channel. This NAS may even be ready for 8K Plex testing as well. But we're going to go for 200 megabit H.265, 10-bit HDR. We're going to play that file. You can hear the fan on my laptop start to ramp up. We are certainly pushing things significantly, but it is playing that file. And just bear in mind, if we played that file here, and if we go ahead and do so the files are playing at the same time, we're able to see that we can play back these files simultaneously across both clients, as long as the system has got enough resources to do both. And there at the top, although we're spiking, we're not spiking irreplicably. So this is some great performance numbers from this NAS in order to play back this file on here. And we're going to go for our final file. This is our biggest 4K file. This is 400 megabits per second 4K Ultra HD HEVC 10-bit HDR. This is a monstrosity file that very, very few users, let's call them the 1%, will own genuine media other than raw captured, modern DSLR type camera. So we're going to play it there. We're going to open it up there. And we can see conversion is a little slow. And we are certainly going to be absolutely hammering the network there. But it should be absolutely fine with what we're doing and seeing. And we're seeing that spike go up. We're seeing it not too bad. We're hitting that 30% mark of conversions. And again, while we're doing that, why don't we try and play the exact same file here? We're playing it here at the bottom, opening it up there on the side. Although we may have overestimated things as it's trying to play the file and we're really oversaturating things, still nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and say that was a moderate success. And although this is the sort of file I would associate with maybe an Intel Core 3, 5, 7 or 9 for playback, this has been a fantastic showing from this system to start playing Plex Media Server 4K files. And overall, I would say that the Flashstor series, both 6 and 12 Pro, are solid Plex Media Server NASs. You're going to have to pay more for the storage media, but as for the cost of the device, at $499 for the 6-bay version, and around $850, $860 for the 12-bay version. You compare that against the cost of hard drive NASs. Overall, that's still a fantastic saving. But this has been how well the Flashstor NAS deals with Plex Media Server at 1080p and 4K. I hope you've enjoyed this file. Do let me know in the comments if you have. We may well get this prepped for 8K testing soon, something we only do with a very small handful of NASs, so do stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Below should be an article coming very, very soon with all of the detailed results of the tests we've done, as well as links to both the review and the before you buy on this NAS, and other guides about ASUS NASs and generally data storage. If you're looking for free advice on your data storage setup, be it for Plex Media Server for business or just backups, use the free advice section over on NAS Compares, the big blue button on the right hand side, or the free community support forum at Ask NAS Compares, or utilize our new Discord where you can ask questions of us and other members of the NAS community. Finally, if you found this video helpful, and if you were going to shop at Amazon, eBuyer, Newegg, B&H, any of those stores and more, if those two things are true, please use the links in the description to take you to those stores. It costs you nothing extra to use those links, and when you get there, anything you buy, and I mean anything, results in a kickback to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares, and it gives you the ability to passively support content creators like us so we can keep doing what we do. It is just us two here, and it really helps us keep things moving. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.